I overheard Mom whisper, "The estate and cash go to Hailey." I went silent. A week later Dad texted, "Insurance is owing." I replied, "Ask your golden girl." I overheard my mom whisper, "The house and money go to Hailey." And in that single moment my entire world shattered. What followed wasn't just a family squabble. It was a brutal, ruthless game of chess where I finally learned to play dirty. And trust me, the board was set long before I even realized I was a pawn. My name is Ryan, and for most of my adult life I was the dependable one. The trustworthy son. The fixer. The guy who somehow got roped into every family catastrophe, financial or otherwise. I was 36 when I eventually quit answering my father's calls. But I had no idea how deep I was until I finally took a step back and looked at the last decade of my life. What I'd spent, what I'd given, and what I'd silently digested to preserve a peace with a family that never really saw me. I work in IT, mostly freelance, and for the past few years I'd been doing well. Not wealthy but comfortable. I owned my home, my car was paid off, no debt, and I had a decent emergency fund. I wasn't flashy about it. No fancy vacations, no sharing my life online. Definitely no talking business at family gatherings. I was just there. The person who showed up when someone needed help moving. When their Wi-Fi failed. Or when mom's prescription cost $450 and they'd forgotten to budget for it again. That was me. Ryan is the fallback. "Oh Ryan, we knew you'd come through, kid." And then there's Hailey. My younger sister. She's 33. If you met her, you'd probably think she was adorable, hilarious, effervescent, and Instagram perfect. She's been out of work for over 9 years, unless you count her short-lived Etsy candle company, which, by the way, required me to design her website and handle all her client returns. She still lives in the rental house where we grew up with my parents, drives a car they bought for her, and posts daily images with phrases like hustle and grind, sipping iced lattes that Dad pays for. And yet, at every family event, the conversation inevitably revolves around her. Her aspirations. Her objectives. Her current artistic endeavor. I gave up expecting fairness from my parents a long time ago, but I never anticipated what happened last summer. It started with an offhand remark. I'd swung by my folks' place to drop off a medicine Mom had run out of. Another last minute, "Can you help us out?" appeal. I handed over the bag ready to leave when Dad asked me to check his laptop. Some updates weren't installing. Nothing critical, so I figured I'd do it quickly and get out of there. Mom and Hailey were talking in the other room while I waited for it to reboot. I assumed I couldn't hear them. "She won't have to worry about money after we go." Mom's voice was quiet but clear. "The property and funds will all go to her. It is only right. Ryan does not need it." I froze. I didn't pay attention to the rest of the conversation. All I could think about was that one sentence. It is only right. I sat there stunned as the update finished and the screen flickered back to life. I must have moved like a robot because I can't recall saying goodbye. I drove home in a daze, my heart thumping. I wasn't upset about the money specifically. It wasn't greed. It was something deeper. Like every quiet, hurtful, and unnoticed moment had suddenly clicked into place. All those years of being the helpful, the dependable one, the pocketbook they could always rely on. And now? I'd been written out of the tale. That night I didn't get much sleep. I kept repeating it in my brain, trying to persuade myself that I had misheard. Maybe they didn't intend it that way. But by dawn I realized it wasn't a mistake. This was confirmation. I was the backup plan. The financial safety net. The person who didn't need anything because I'd never asked for it. And it rendered me invisible. Still, I didn't say anything. Not yet. I didn't confront anyone or call them out. I just became silent. The next time Mom asked me to help fix the washer, I declined, claiming I was too busy. When Hailey texted me about opening a pop-up business for her latest passion, painted seashell jewelry, I literally left her on read. And when Dad phoned because their internet was down and Hailey had an online meeting, I didn't even listen to the voicemail. A week went by like that. I wasn't trying to be petty. I simply stopped offering myself up. It was the first time in years that I had drawn a line. I expected them to notice. Maybe they'd inquire what was wrong. But all I received was quiet until the text. "Insurance is due." That was it. No "Hello Ryan." No "I hope you're well." Just a demand. as if I were their personal accountant. I looked at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. I could have ignored it. I could have typed up a lengthy explanation, letting go of everything I had been holding back for years. But instead I kept things simple. 3 words. Ask your golden girl. That marked the beginning of the transformation. The moment I picked myself. What I didn't realize at the time was how far and fast things would spiral. Because when you remove the crutch that people have relied on for years, they don't attempt to get up. They get into a panic. They lash out. And in my family, that terror manifested in a very unique and nasty way. My aunt made the first call. It ended with a family meal that I'll never forget. I didn't answer Aunt Diane's call the first time. I watched it ring out on my screen while I sat on the couch sipping cold coffee and pretending to check my email. But when she phoned again an hour later and left a message, I decided I'd at least hear what she had to say. Diane has never been the meddling kind. She's my mother's elder sister, fairly blunt and sharp as glass. She's also the only one in our family who has ever seen past Hailey's darling facade. Her voicemail was brief. Ryan, call me back. Something is odd. Your father has been talking nonstop. It's about the money. I recall sitting up upright like I had been startled. I called her right back. Hey, she answered on the first ring. You okay? Yeah, I asked. What's going on? She didn't waste time. I was over at your parents' house yesterday dropping off the space heater your mother requested. She said Hailey's room gets drafty. Anyway, when I arrive, your father is in the garage with Chuck and Frank, drinking beers and talking crap like it's poker night in 1992. I knew where this was headed. My stomach constricted. He starts talking about how ungrateful children are these days. Says, you've turned your back on the family and you don't lift a finger to help anymore. I tightened my jaw. Of course he did. Then she continued, her tone changing. He says something that makes me want to hurl that heater at him. He responds, good thing we made the right choice with Hailey. At least we'll have one kid who takes care of us when we're gone. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. You okay? She said politely. I swallowed hard. I'm fine. No, you're not, she said sharply. Ryan, you've been bending over backward for them for how long now? 12 years. And this is how they talk about you the second you stop funding their lifestyle. That was the term financing. As if I were a bank account with a name. I thanked her and hung up. But I couldn't escape the impression that I had been smacked in front of a crowd and no one had intervened. That weekend I headed to the mountains. Just for the day. I needed the distance and solitude. I hiked a path I used to use when I was younger, before things became difficult and I became the responsible one. I sat at the overlook and simply thought about everything. I spent the holidays alone because Hailey required more attention during her breakups. The costs I paid when Mom's co-payments were too exorbitant. The laptop I got for Dad 2 Christmases ago. The same one I had just mended after overhearing the talk that started it all. I remembered lending Hailey $2,500 when she said she'd finally gotten a position at some marketing business that turned out to be a pyramid scam. She never repaid me. I never asked. I believed it had broken the tranquility. However, I recognized that tranquility had always come at my price. Things swiftly escalated after that. First came the group text. Mom wrote a long paragraph to me, Dad, Hailey, and my Aunt Colleen, who never responds to anything. Anyway, it seemed like a forced essay. Family is more about love and support than money. We appreciate Ryan's desire for separation. But we're a team and have always supported one another. We should not have to remind anyone about the sacrifices we've made as parents. That is all I will say. That final sentence, the passive-aggressive cherry on top, made me pace my living room. They made sacrifices. I didn't reply, but Hailey did. Thank you, Mom. Some of us realize what family truly entails. Crimson heart. I nearly laughed. Almost. The next week, Dad sent another SMS. There were only 3 words this time. Need money for groceries? No punctuation. No thanks. I responded with 5. Ask your preferred one. Hailey phoned about 15 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail. She phoned again and again. I eventually picked up on the 5th ring. What the hell is your problem? She snapped, ignoring any greetings. You're being selfish and childish, and it's really humiliating. I didn't raise my voice. I was too exhausted for it. Who is it embarrassing for? For Mom and Dad. For the remainder of us. Do you believe you're proving something? All you're doing is forsaking those who reared you. I let out a slow breath. The same folks who abandoned you behind my back. Silence followed by a scoff. Oh my God, she said. Did you hear that? You're really behaving like it matters. It matters, I said. It matters that I spent years supporting them before they decided I wasn't a part of their future. She burst. You are okay. You have a job, a condominium, and a car. I'm still finding my footing. You've been getting on your feet for 9 years. Click. She hung up. A few days later, I received a letter via the mail, actual paper, from my mother. Inside was a card with a watercolor lake image and the words, "Family means everything," printed on the front. She wrote inside, I wish you'd remember what your grandma always said. No matter how far you travel, blood is blood, and you can't just walk away. We love you. Please consider what you are doing to us. No apologies, no acknowledgement, only shame wrapped in pastel ink. It would have been funny if it hadn't hurt so badly. But the true breaking point did not occur until the night of the surprise supper. Aunt Diane called me again. She mentioned that they'd be eating supper on Sunday night. Claimed it was only for close relatives. Yet your name popped up. They claimed you'd probably be too busy to demonstrate why it's just as well. That stung worse than I thought. I didn't RSVP. I didn't say anything. However, I drove over on Sunday at 6 p.m. I didn't go inside. I parked across the street, lights turned off and motor going just to watch. The driveway was crowded. My cousin Logan's Jeep, Hailey's white Civic, and Aunt Colleen's minivan. I looked through the glass as everyone assembled at the dining table. My usual place at family dinners had been taken by someone else. Hailey sat laughing as if she owned the place. My parents appeared relaxed. I wasn't even a thought. But I knew something they didn't. Since earlier that week, I had a private chat with their lawyer. What my parents didn't realize was that I helped them refinance their home 6 years ago. That's right. For the sake of convenience, I agreed to co-sign some tax paperwork. I was the one who made the phone calls and completed the documents. My name remained on some of those papers, including some rights that they never bothered to examine. I hadn't done anything. Not yet. But while I sat in that car watching them toast over a table I used to arrange for them, I knew something had changed in me. Not out of malice but out of clarity. They picked her. They made that decision long ago. And I'd finally made mine. The true twist? The evening wasn't simply for fun. There was an announcement. And I only found out about their plans because Hailey, in her boundless hubris, chose to upload a photo. Her smile between Mom and Dad was captioned, "So eager to begin the new chapter. I can't wait to share soon." I gazed at the post. Then I hit save because I knew what it meant, and I had a sense that what they were about to say would need a reaction that they wouldn't expect. I didn't get much sleep the night of the meal. There was something about viewing that post. Hailey, grinning, her arms stretched over both of our parents as if she had already inherited the crown. That broke something in me that I had no idea was vulnerable. I wasn't furious. Not anymore. This was the odd part. I just felt hollow, like if I was mourning a non-existent version of my family. I kept telling myself that I should become used to it by now. Favoritism, disdain, and the silent assumption that I'd always be there in the background cleaning up everyone else's mess. But something about that photo, that silly caption, and her excitement to go on to the next chapter, made it all feel permanent, as if a door had closed behind me, and I hadn't even seen the click. For the first time in years, I did not want to open it again. That next week I turned inward. I stopped reading their texts. I scrolled through Hailey's manicured Instagram of candles, crystals, and brunch. I removed Facebook completely. I knew if I kept staring I'd be hurting. And honestly, I was sick of bleeding for people who didn't realize I was injured. It was hardly a spectacular cleansing. I didn't toss my phone in the lake or make any public announcements. I simply quietly disconnected. But solitude has a strange way of resonating. It started out peacefully. Then it became loud. Without the continual hum of family commotion, I was alone with my thoughts, and it hit me harder than I anticipated. How much of my identity was based on being useful to those who regarded me as handy rather than cared for. I realized I hadn't really established a life for myself, but rather one for others. And with the scaffolding gone, I was left with a weird hollow shell. The first week was horrible. I went to work but just chatted with clients on the bare minimum requirements. I avoided calls from friends, declined invitations, and left groceries in the bag overnight more than once. My apartment became disorganized. I got sloppy. There was one night that I will never forget. It was raining sideways, beating on my windows as if it was trying to get in. I was seated on the floor of my living room, back against the sofa, laptop closed and phone facing down. I just realized that Mom's birthday was on that day. I had not phoned or texted. The shame was thick in my chest, familiar and suffocating. Then I recalled something from years ago. Her 62nd birthday celebration, the one I planned. I hired the restaurant, made the deposit, planned with the bakery, and even purchased her favorite type of white flowers. And at the end of the night, Hailey received all of the credit. Hailey chose such an adorable theme. Mom raved to her friends. I recall standing next to the cake, holding a stack of dirty dishes and listening to it. I recall saying nothing. That night, sitting in the dark with the rain pounding outside, I said out loud, "You don't owe them anything." I meant it. The next morning I started rebuilding. I did nothing dramatic. I didn't plan a solo journey to Iceland or begin journaling on a cliffside at dawn. I recently began taking my own life seriously, one bit at a time. I cleaned my entire flat from top to bottom. Not just a surface wash-off but a complete purging. I didn't want to look at old invoices, dead batteries, mismatched socks, or faded photographs anymore. I packaged everything up and drove it to the landfill. Then I stood in the parking lot, watching the package slip into the trash can. And for the first time in weeks I breathed completely. That night I opened my laptop and glanced at a list of projects I planned to undertake if I ever got the time. I had constructed it in 2021 during lockdown. Most of it was pipe dreams. A few were business concepts. One of these struck my attention. A tech support subscription service for older individuals, particularly those who did not grow up with computers. I dubbed it Kind Line in the doc. I grinned a little. The next day I purchased the domain. Started little. I contacted two of my former clients, both seniors whom I had previously assisted with simple computer issues, and asked if they would be interested in monthly check-ins, device assistance, fraud warnings, and the like. They both agreed quickly. So I created a scheduling system, produced a welcome packet, and began reaching out to others. Within a month I had 12 clients. Within 2 I had 36. It was not showy. It was not viral. But it was mine. Nothing I'd ever done for my family had been as meaningful to me as this, and it felt great. I used to despise marketing, but now I'm posting on LinkedIn, reaching out to local community centers, and providing free courses on how to avoid getting scammed online. I even created a leaflet, printed 120 copies, and handed them out at libraries, doctors' offices, and senior homes. Word spread faster than I anticipated. People liked the patience and absence of jargon. They trusted me. I hadn't felt so confident in years. By spring, I had officially registered the company as an LLC, hired a part-time assistant, and delegated the website refresh to a design student I met at a workshop. She was enthusiastic, intelligent, and kept calling me Mr. Ryan, which made me feel about 62, but I didn't correct her. Somewhere along the way, my apartment began to feel like home. I bought new curtains, framed some art, and even set up a small herb garden on the windowsill. I hosted 2 friends for dinner whom I had avoided during my slump, and both commented on how different I appeared. Lighter, one of them said. Like you're finally breathing. I was. But that did not mean I had forgotten. The wound was still present, just scabbed over. It would occasionally flare. Like the day I learned what Hailey's big announcement was. I hadn't been following her on social media, but one of my clients, a lovely woman named Margaret, mentioned it during a tech call. "You said your sister's name was Hailey, right?" she inquired, looking over her glasses. "Is that the one doing that lifestyle show online?" I mumbled. "What?" "She's got this little web series, Rooted Radiance, or something like that." It popped up in my YouTube feed, all candles and self-care and stories about healing your inner child. Sounded familiar. I searched it after we finished and there she was. Hailey and Rooted Radiance together. Episode 2. Breaking generational trauma, even if it means cutting off toxic relationships. I watched for exactly 4 minutes, just long enough to hear her remark in a faint, breathy voice. Sometimes choosing yourself means walking away from people who expect too much and give too little. I chuckled, not because it was amusing, but because I couldn't believe it. She began narrating my narrative but then flipped it. She portrayed herself as the wounded heroine, the one who valiantly separated herself from a sibling who wanted too much and did not respect her boundaries. Who, get this, used money to manipulate family relations. I should have been upset. Instead, I captured a screenshot. Then I opened a new folder on my desktop. I titled it Evidence, not out of spite, but because I suspected I'd need it eventually. And that day wasn't far away. Because a month later, I received a call from the attorney. Not mine, theirs. "Hello, Ryan. This is Graham Pierce. I am phoning on behalf of your parents, Robert and Linda." He was polite and careful, explaining that he had been reading their estate records, and that certain details about previous ownership arrangements and financial contributions needed to be clarified. He inquired whether I was available for a meeting. I consented quietly, despite my pounding heart, because I knew what they were up to. They were rewriting the history, but they had no idea I had already begun creating my own version of the future. When I walked into Graham Pierce's office, it felt like I was entering a negotiation that I hadn't asked for, but had been preparing for my entire life without realizing it. His workplace was all polished wood, stylishly neutral art, and stiff leather seats that reminded you it wasn't supposed to be comfy. He offered me water, which I rejected, and motioned for the seat across from his desk. I took it and gently placed the compact black folder I had brought with me, containing my own collection of documents, on my lap. He folded his hands. "Thank you for coming, Ryan. I understand that this is unexpected." I nodded once. "You mentioned there were estate worries." He flashed a cautious grin. One of those lawyer grins that should put you at rest, but instead makes you want to check your wallet. "Your parents are revising several aspects of their estate plan. They recently rewrote their will, and throughout the process, a few pieces of information from previous years surfaced. Things we needed to clarify before settling anything." I didn't answer immediately. I wanted him to talk first. Lawyers enjoy filling silences. It is a professional danger. He continued, "Specifically, there are a few financial transactions from around 6 years ago when the mortgage was refinanced. At the time, I believe you were a co-signer." "Correct," I stated. "And it appears that under that agreement, you were momentarily awarded what we would call a contingent interest in the land. It was transitory, of course, but the title documents from that year show you as a co-owner." "That's correct," I responded again, opening my folder and placing a copy of the necessary title paper on his desk. "My name remains on file with the county. It was never removed." Graham paused. That knocked him off balance. He took up the page, looked it over and nodded slowly. "Yes. This is what we discovered during our search. We were just trying to finalize the release. Your folks believed it had been taken care of." "It wasn't," I explained gently, "and I never signed anything waiving that interest. If they wish to transfer entire ownership to someone else, such as my sister, I need to sign off." He made another lawyer grin. This one was more stretched. "Of course, this is all a formality." I slumped back in my chair. "Sure, but if it's only a formality, I'm guessing there's no urgency." He hesitated again and carefully said that they hoped to fix the issue before the house was legally transferred. There it was. The true cause. The supper, the caption, and the next chapter. They were turning over the house to Hailey. It was symbolic but also strategic. The house was finally paid off, due in large part to my years of silent payments during the refinancing process. Transferring it now would lessen future probate issues and make it easier for Hailey to hang on to it. And I was the final loose thread, one they didn't think could rip the whole arrangement apart. I grinned for the first time. "So, if they want my signature, I'll also need a few things." Graham blinked. "For example, I may receive backdated compensation for the closing fees I spent during the refinancing, as well as the property tax I paid for the next 2 years. I have the receipts." I placed a second sheet on his desk, followed by a third. "And while we're at it, any documentation that my parents signed certifying that I was a financial contribution to the property. I'd like to put those in the estate filing just to be cautious." He appeared to be a little worried now. That may complicate the present estate draft. I stood up and said, then they'll have to decide whether it's worth the house. Thank you for the water offer. I left him looking at his papers. On the way home, I put the music up louder than normal. Not angry or sad music, but something with rhythms and momentum that made me feel as if the earth under me was finally mine. That was the day I stopped reacting and began planning. The initial step was subtle. I phoned a friend of mine named Tessa who worked in real estate law. We'd known each other since college, and while we weren't close anymore, we still sent each other happy birthdays and, "Did you see this meme?" texts. I told her I needed some advice. She told me she owed me a favor for helping her parents set up their smart TV via FaceTime. We met in a coffee cafe near her office. I placed everything out: the title, tax records, and refinancing receipts. She inspected everything with a quiet, satisfied whistle. "You effectively have a paper trail proving you own around 35% of the residence," she said. "Only around 35%. Well, theoretically, if your name was on the deed during the refinancing, and you contributed to expenditures directly related to asset maintenance, you have a good case for partial equity, especially if nothing is signed indicating otherwise." I drank my coffee. "That's good to know." She looked at me. "You aren't going to try to push a sale, right?" I shook my head. "No, I do not want the house." "So what do you want?" I didn't respond straight away because I wasn't totally certain. It was not about money. It was not even about the house. It was about the principle. About how I'd been treated like an ATM for years, only to be turned off the moment I stopped emptying myself dry. And now they expected me to be quiet, docile, and helpful. I was finished with that. I eventually stated, "I want them to realize I am not disposable." Tessa nodded. "Then don't be." The next stage was to collect allies. It began with Aunt Diane. I invited her to lunch, not at our normal restaurant, but in a small downtown bar where I was confident we wouldn't stumble into anybody we knew. I told her everything: the title, the call from the lawyer, and Hailey's online show. She didn't speak much until the end. Then she leaned forward, fixed my gaze, and said, "You have every right to do what you're doing, but don't just play defense. Make a move." "What type of move?" She grinned. "The type that reminds them who kept the roof over their heads, while their favorite acted like an entrepreneur on Instagram." A week later, I sent a notice of interest to the county clerk's office. It was a simple legal step, simply a formal acknowledgement of my financial claim to the property. Nothing big, no lawsuit, no eviction threat. Just a quiet little note on the house's record stating that no one could sell, refinance, or transfer it unless my share was resolved first. I knew my folks would find out eventually. I did not expect it to happen so soon. For days later, Mom arrived at my door. I hadn't seen her for months. Not since the last time I brought one of her medicines and overheard her discussing my exclusion in the will. She seemed smaller than I recalled. Not physically, but smaller, like someone who had been shielded by illusions and was suddenly standing in the true light. "Ryan," she said, as if it were both a question and an accusation. I opened the door wider, but did not move aside. "I'm not here to dispute," she said swiftly. "I simply want to know why you are making things so complicated." I nearly laughed. "Do you think this is complicated? You could have just spoken with us," she said. "I did," I responded. "You just didn't listen." She blinked, taken aback. "We gave Hailey the house because she required stability," she remarked. "You're doing well." "You don't even know what I'm doing," I added. "You never ask. You just assume." There was a silence. Then she spoke gently. "You have always been the strong one." "No," I responded. "I've just always been the quiet one." "That's not the same thing." She didn't react. I did not allow her in. I advised her to talk with her lawyer. I then closed the door. That night, I printed the most recent customer billing report for Kind Line. 72 active customers, 3 part-time aides, and a community collaboration with a nearby elderly facility. I placed the report in my folder, right next to the title paperwork, the property tax receipts, the screenshots of Hailey's show. Because this was not a rage-fueled payback. It was chess, and I just moved my queen. Let me start by stating this. Revenge doesn't always include pyrotechnics. Sometimes it's a slow, methodical burn, quiet, measured, and even elegant in its progression. Mine was not loud. It did not include public outbursts or yelling bouts over a dining table. No, my vengeance was carried out through quiet signings, courteous phone calls, and the gradual dismantling of a false story. It was patient, surgical, and effective. Things quieted down after Mom's surprise visit. I believed they could be regrouping. Perhaps Hailey was recording another episode of Rooted Radiance, in which she would sadly warn her audience about toxic masculinity in the family, or how some people only provide love with conditions attached. But I heard nothing for 4 weeks. There was no phone call, no text message, and no passive-aggressive meme on my feed. Just quiet. Then came the letter. It arrived on Thursday in an official-looking envelope with my name neatly printed on the front. Inside was a formal proposition written by their lawyer, Graham Pierce. It explained the conditions for surrendering my interest in the property. In response, they presented a $7,500 check, as a gesture of goodwill. They presented it as a compromise, a reasonable payment for your limited financial participation with the property. I laughed when I read that. 7.5 grand. $7,500 for 12 years of emergency, grocery, medicine, internet, repair, and refinancing expenses. $7,500 for being the safety net they let go as soon as it was convenient. I did not even respond. Instead, I phoned Tessa. She reread the letter, giggled under her breath, and asked, "Are you ready to make this formal?" I nodded. We drafted a counteroffer based on facts, not anger or threats. She provided an exact account of my financial contributions to the home over the previous 12 years, replete with supporting receipts and bank statements. The total came closer to $42,000. She also noted state legislation governing equitable interest in jointly named property. Most crucially, she added my request, which was for a lien rather than cash. That is correct. A legally recorded lien on the house, not to force a sale, nor to evict anybody, but to assure that if the house was refinanced, transferred, or sold, whether next year or 12 years from now, I would receive my portion plus interest. We sent it to Graham certified, of course. This time the response came quickly. 4 days later, Hailey arrived at my residence. I didn't respond at first, just observed her through the peephole. She was pacing, her big sunglasses slipping down her nose, and her phone was in her hand as if she was preparing to livestream the altercation. When I eventually answered the door, she did not wait for me to speak. "You're ruining everything," she snarled. "Do you know how hard I've worked for this?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Work?" She ignored me. "This house is supposed to be mine. I've already invested in improvements. I am filming material there. I've got several pending agreements. Brands want to support the kitchen transition. You can't simply go in and put a lien on it like you're doing something." I leaned against the door frame. "I'm owed something. You're doing this to hurt Mom and Dad." "No," I said. "I am doing this to protect myself. You never cared about the house before. You did not even want it. And I still haven't," I responded. "I want what's fair, that's all." She stared at me, breathing heavily, as if she couldn't believe I wasn't backing down. "Ryan, you are not the victim here." I made a slow nod. "I am not. I used to volunteer, but I no longer do." She turned and stormed away without saying anything else. It was the last time I saw her in person. The lien revolutionized everything. Hailey was suddenly unable to secure her brand deals. Sponsors pulled out. She was unable to have the insurance transfer authorized, and any future home equity loan was now subject to a legal encumbrance that she could not avoid. She'd upload filtered footage from the kitchen with phrases like "manifesting through the noise," but I could see the fissures. Finally, one of her fans tagged me in the comments. "You're the brother, correct? This entire situation makes so much sense now." I didn't respond. I did not have to. Meanwhile, my parents took a fresh approach. Graham called again respectfully, informed me that Robert and Linda were rethinking their estate arrangement. He asked me to a meeting that included all parties. I consented, not because I wanted reconciliation but because I needed closure. We met again in Graham's office. My parents sat stiffly on one side of the table, and Hailey was noticeably missing. She'd likely learned she was a liability in these circumstances. Tessa joined me this time, not just for legal assistance, but also for balance. I knew I'd be inclined to revert to old behaviors, make excuses for them and downplay. Having her there helped me stay focused. The meeting was polite. Graham said that the will had been amended to include me again, however little, in a portion of the savings, as well as a section regarding equitable property division. They'd also agreed to settle the lien now, providing a single amount of $35,000. Still less than I was expecting, but near enough to indicate they were taking it seriously. Then Mom did something unexpected. She spoke. "We did not aim to hurt you," she explained. "We assumed you didn't need us." I met her gaze. "I did not. I needed you to show me respect." She blinked, and for a brief moment, I saw something genuine flicker there. Not guilt, but rather the beginning of it. Dad didn't speak much. He seemed exhausted and smaller than I recalled. It was unusual to see him like this, less a figure of authority and more just a guy, flawed, aged, and unsure. I signed the paperwork, took the compensation, removed the lien, and departed. The breakdown with Hailey was slower. Without the mansion as her guaranteed studio, her content lacked polish. Her brand relationships dried up. She shared a sad video about family betrayal, which elicited a lot of compassion but no new deals. She eventually moved on to something else. Energy coaching, I believe. The last time I looked, she was doing Instagram Live from her car. I stopped checking after that. Kind line developed faster than I anticipated. By the end of the year, I had more than 120 active clients and a wait list. I relocated to a tiny office space downtown, employed Tessa part-time as general attorney, and recruited 3 additional assistants. I even launched a YouTube channel called Basic Tech Tips for Seniors. Nothing flashy, just myself, my voice, a clean background, and a continual stream of people praising me for explaining things clearly. At Thanksgiving, I held my own dinner, inviting friends and a few clients. Aunt Diane brought pie. We joked, played music, and ate until we were too stuffed to move. I did not think of the old house once. I received a Christmas card from my folks. Just a card, no checks, no requests, and no guilt. There was a simple note inside. "We hope you are well. We're proud of what you've created." I didn't weep, but I sat with the card for quite some time. I didn't respond because I'd spoken everything I needed to say. Just not with words. With boundaries. With silence. And with the calm, consistent act of choosing myself for once.